welcome back. Thanks for staying tuned. So now I'm gonna start moderating the first panel discussion about the technical implications of a decentralized identity layer and data ownership. And I really have a top lineup with me. So I will have Bruce Pon, which you have already met, Fabian Vogelsteller. He is a blockchain veteran who was part of the Ethereum Foundation in its early days. He helped shape the Ethereum space, building the official Ethereum wallet, the first decentralized Web3 browser. And in 2015, he proposed the ERC20, the token standard that initiated the ICO wave and the DeFi movement. So welcome Fabian, welcome Bruce. And then my third guest today is Peter Großkopf. So Peter is the CTO and Managing Director of Börse Stuttgart Digital Exchange, and it's the first regulated digital asset exchange in Germany. Before that, he was CTO and co-founder at Solaris Bank. So thank you so much and welcome Peter as well. So let's start with our first question. So maybe to Fabian. You mentioned this will be a crucial piece for the upcoming Web3 identity system, which will entail many of such systems working in concert. What other systems would you see as potential partnership for Fractal? How can they strengthen each other towards working in concert?
Hello, first of all, thank you for having me. I think like what I meant is basically what we need is not just one singular system of like identity, and this is, we have some systems that try to achieve this. For example, there's the sovereign foundation having the sovereign network and so on. But I think what we have to understand is we have to have standardized systems that allow to connect to each other and allow to like connect different pieces, like for example, where is data sitting, how, so there's certain permission layers that we need to have. And there's other pieces that might be on a blockchain. And there's other pieces that might be not on a blockchain. That might be in different kind of either centrally or less centrally owned data places. And I think if we like find the right standards and the right way to connect this, we can create this Web3 identity ecosystem that we have not yet seen actually. There's a lot of talk about identity in Web3 since a long time, but it hasn't happened yet. So, and there's also some other pieces, which is these public identities that, for example, we are building with Luxo. And I think it needs like these different pieces and then tying them smartly together to create this kind of new identity ecosystem that we want to see.
Thanks, good answer. Maybe now moving to Peter. So Peter, you've got experience in traditional banking system, but you're also an early crypto adopter. I'm curious to see, what do you think is crucial before the mass will adopt really a decentralized world, or will it just go without them noticing? Maybe like using apps without actually realizing it's a decentralized blockchain application. How do you see the future also of traditional banking? I know this question is a little bit long, but maybe you can please elaborate.
Yeah, first I also wanted to add on Fabian's post, because I was also thinking that the kind of the decentralized or the identity is also not solved in the centralized world, right? Because now talking about banking and onboarding experience of fintech apps, so this is like a so bad user experience. Probably most of the audience has seen this somewhere, used the service like waiting for hours or even days in the waiting line and waiting to be KYC'd. So this already feels odd. But at the same time, then also you ask yourself, okay, why should I do this? What are they doing with the data? Okay, I'm not a money launderer, so why do I have to do this right now here? And I think this is kind of the problem situation that we're currently facing. And so to have a decentralized identity, I think that's a very interesting thought, and I really hope that that this is going to happen, because So as also talking about the onboarding experience with fintech services or crypto services, you even have the problem that you need to onboard on any platform that you're using. Yeah. So if you sign up with Coinbase or with another service or with a bank or whatever, you need to redo your KYC all the time. So why isn't the data shared? Yeah. So and why do I have to update my data at any service? And kind of also even the bank has the obligation to update the data in frequent times, so because they're obliged to that. And so this is where like a digital ID comes into play to tackle that problem, and even going a few steps further. So for example, with the advertising use case of Fractal, to use that first party data for advertising, but I even see more use cases that can come. So like 12 years ago, there was the data portability movement, so that I always compare with what in the end then also happened with GDPR and kind of the right for data portability. And I think a digital identity enhanced with even more data can become a huge thing, not only for advertising and for KYCing people. It could even be used for attention data that like what did I buy at Amazon or so, and share that data with other services that can make use of it and make suggestions to me.
That's interesting. And you mentioned also the GDPR regulation and how it actually helped users have portability of their data. Maybe a question would be, do you feel like regulations are really pushing technology? Are they actually hindering the development? What do you see there? And I think coming from a perspective of the CTO of Solaris Bank, which is basically the one banking infrastructure that is actually enabling all of these other projects that would otherwise not be funded or actually be created by the traditional banking system.
From my side, or from my perspective, it's coming from two sides. So there's the one thing that you have to do KYC, and that there has to be some sort of identity when signing up for example, a financial service. But I also see the benefit or the beneficial use of a digital identity for all the other purposes, because kind of in advertising, nobody's forced to kind of verify your data and make sure that it's right, and there's no law for that and nobody's controlling that. But in the end, kind of if you have first party data, it's pretty useful for advertising network to present you advertising that's useful for you and maybe gives you a benefit. And maybe to go like even further, like for another use case for digital identity that I was thinking about like for quite a while now is also fake news. Yeah, so because in the end, so like the web how it is today is like full of fake news, and people create fake users, do posts, whatever, and nobody's able to verify if this is like created by somebody real. And like a digital identity that makes use of like cryptography, secure snarks, and all this fancy stuff that really assures privacy. So where it can kind of verify this identity is real, but I don't expose kind of personal data while accessing it. That's a super interesting use case from my point of view as well.
Very interesting. Maybe a question now to Bruce. And it's how come the data right now is so siloed, and how can Web3 actually help here?
So I think that, you know, in the work that we've done in 7 years in the blockchain space, it's clear that identity is a core piece. And I still don't think that we've found the answer. There's a lot of promising projects, but it doesn't feel like there's something that has stuck so strongly as some other aspects of the crypto space. And so it's very clear that there's more work to be done. In terms of the siloed data, it comes down to friction and caring. So if people value convenience over the privacy of their data, for whatever reasons the data isn't commercially viable at this stage, or they just don't care, then you're not going to get the adoption of some of these Web3 technologies, because the barriers for entry, the friction, the costs are still now too high. It's Web3 is still a niche in many ways. And so I'm optimistic that if we all are working towards this to bring the cost down to very low cost, we improve the user interface, and just like Bitcoin, we improve the narrative on the value of privacy and the value of unsiloing people's data, then that data can start to break free. And then finally, once that starts happening, then you'll have trading on the data where there's enough liquidity in whatever the data asset, so that people start seeing a market price for what the data is truly worth. And market prices can solve a lot of things. They don't solve everything, but they can solve a lot of things, especially when it comes to incentives and behavior of people.
Yes, thank you so much. Maybe Fabian, in terms of usability, well, you are really one of the thought leaders when it comes to Ethereum, and also having driven the adoption of this blockchain. What do you think is needed now?
So I think I think like, and I'm always like really interested in how can we make this usable, and like what's the pieces and what's the steps needed and the standards needed to make this kind of like easy to use, and like what causes adoption in the first place. And I think what we can do is we can I think if we have like a good root identity, like a basic system, which is kind of like your address, it's like your profile. If you start from that, then you have the basic starting point. And if people start to care about that root identity, let's say it's a public profile, right? You start to care about that because you have issued things, or you have like made statements that are somehow coming from this profile, or you have activities somewhere, be it in an application or be it on the blockchain that somehow references your public profile. If you have this root identity, people care about that. And this thing can be used for logins and all kinds of things. Then the question is, or what becomes variable is how you store the data and where do you store the data. And I think everybody always thinks this in this whole picture. They think, oh, we need to have the data storage solved, and then we have to have the root identity solved, and only if we have the full package, and then we give it to somebody, and then hopefully they adopt it. But if we decouple these two things, then like where do you store the data becomes actually something you can choose, and you can also swap it. So it's not a problem if I store it with a centralized service for a while, and then I realize, okay, that there's this better decentralized system. It's either free or even cost me, but it's, I feel better with it because the centralized service was shit, then you can now change without changing your root identity. The problem is, if you want to change your identity today, you go from Twitter to Facebook to Instagram, wherever, your public identity, it's tied to the platform. You literally lose it all, right? Like you have to change literally your identity for like your public reference. And it's not that you can just say, I store certain things with Facebook and certain things with this provider, but my root identity stays the same. And I think if we can solve that problem, and then like things become a lot more flexible. And what Fractal wants to do with this identities that you have in the browser, like for example, this could be one way. I think it should be also tied to public profiles, because that's how we interact in the web, right? We're not just like anonymous people. We have a face, and then and also what you say, Peter, like, fake news or things like this can be solved if there's always a reference back. So you have to stand by what you post or by what you say, like as we do in social media already. But you untie this from any platform. And I think untying these two things, the root identity, how do I find somebody, who he is, and then where things are stored, then adoption can be possible. Because then people can pick and choose, they can choose the shitty provider, the good provider, the centralized provider, the non-centralized provider, but it roots back to something they will continue using even beyond, swapping the data place. So I think that's the way to go.
And maybe also jumping in again, from my point of view, you can use the technology in a way that you can still keep like privacy as preserved as possible, right? Because I think now, like especially coming from the cryptocurrency world, the interesting aspect about it is that you can stay private if you like. So it's not like a credit card transaction that kind of like leaves like digital footprints behind everywhere. So if you wanted to be pseudonymous or anonymous, you can do it. And I think like digital identity done right could do the same kind of. There could be an identifier that just makes sure that identity is real, and kind of puts like a badge somewhere, like even if it's an anonymous post, and then it's really about the usability that you can offer. And I think so I'm like totally impressed of many of the DEXs and like non-custodial wallets and so on that are out there. So the usability, like compared to like 1 year ago, is so good in these days. And so I truly believe that also the user experience of a digital ID will be so seamless, also like in the near future, that people won't realize that it's a decentralized technology behind. And I think that's also a message that we need to send, especially as being like the technical people here, because you know, like we are always pretty keen on the technology and are super interested how this works, and we want to also give it some visibility. But in the end, when it comes to the user usually doesn't care or does not need to take care about it. So is the internet decentralized or not? Probably most of the people don't care. But yeah, so let's really preserve that also the Web3 stays as decentralized as possible. And if we provide it with a good usability, it can be truly decentralized.
Maybe stepping a little bit back. So let's say we all now have our digital identities, but basically you need someone to attest that you are exactly this person. And maybe it's a question to you, Bruce. So right now with the Ocean data marketplace, you basically have the community also assess whether the quality of the data is right or is high or is low, and basically also price it. Do you see maybe a parallel way or some similarities also on personal data, and how can someone or a testers actually how can an attester become of quality so that they know that this person who claims to be who he is or who has this bank record or so on and so forth can happen?
So I think identity is it's a touchy subject to get right. I think that at a fundamental level, you as a core entity should have that core entity. And then from there, you should have multiple avatars possible to represent yourself in different audiences and channels, so that you can play whatever kind of roles that you feel are important in, you know, representing yourself. And maybe it's best to give an example. So if you're really into, let's say, miniature cars in one group, and you have a certain persona there versus you also are a crypto trader in another group, there's not really a need to combine those identities. And so I think that is one thing that's really important in whatever solution is possible. Part of course, identity verification is attestation. So layering on top of this fundamental principle of the core plus multiple avatars, you can have each avatar being verified by third parties and stuff like that for whatever economic incentive there is to do that, or for whatever group that needs. I think that that's the type of building block and flexibility that we're going to need in the future if we are going to have some sort of successful identity protocol that people will feel comfortable to adopt, because the dark spaces in society allow people to grow, experiment, and make mistakes. And that is a fundamental aspect of being human. And those are things that particularly in Europe, for instance, where you want that right to be protected, because that is a right. There's a lot of things that we can talk about as being privileges but the fundamental right to your own privacy and to represent yourself in those ways has to be respected, no matter what type of identity framework is there with attestations, as a Web3 ETH wallet, these types of things.
And I would actually like to add to this, because you were asking also about, how can attestations, how can you create like an environment where people attest each other, and how can we value the attestation and figure out like who is a valuable attester and who is not? I think it's on the end fundamentally works exactly the same way like everything in society. It's based on reputation, right? It doesn't even matter if you know the persona or the company behind a certain attester. If he has enough reputation gathered through his work and gathered through maybe a point system or reference system or reputation system of some sort, you will be able to trust that attestation, because if he would lie or if he would like give a wrong attestation, sooner or later he would lose his reputation. Ideally we have systems like this that can basically create incentives for people not to lie, because they will downrank basically. And then you can even trust an anonymous attester, because he does a good service. People like learn to trust that, even if he has a fake name and a funky profile picture. But this is really, it doesn't really need to be necessarily a face. But I think reputation, if the system is done in such a way that you can't play it, that you can't game it, that you can't like create sock puppet accounts easily and make upvote somebody, that it really required some work and some interactions for this reputation to grow. We can trust all kinds of things, including completely anonymous attesters and sources. So I think that's how it has to go.
Yeah, but I also think still, like even when you kind of like build a reputation and a reputation score, I think you still really need to make sure that this doesn't go the wrong way, right? So you don't want to end up with a kind of like a reputation-based society, so that so I don't want to elaborate too much about it, because you're definitely not thinking in that direction, I'm pretty sure. But yeah, so I think kind of this is also what I meant with my previous post. So you somehow need to make sure that there's like a data set behind the identity that kind of like contains that reputational score that really kind of makes this a valid identity and gives it some proof. But you shouldn't use this for like the wrong purposes, because this could also potentially then exclude people and so on, and and that would be kind of also a bit the opposite. So, but yeah, I think, and then also like adding to also to like the same sense, like digital identity is like it's like such a difficult animal, because kind of on the one hand it can give privacy and independence for users in the web, but at the same time it can make you completely visible and can kill like your privacy completely. So it makes you like a glass human, and of course we don't want that, and so therefore I think the best way to tackle it is to kind of build it yourself and not let the state building it. And therefore, I think it's also good that Fractal takes that mission.
I mean, I would like to add something to this, Peter. I mean, I think that's exactly what brings us back to what Bruce said. It's about having different personas, having different avatars, right? We obviously don't want to have like there's just one identity and suddenly everything you do somehow sprinkles out of that one identity like a kraken. We should have many, right? And some we inherently know are public. So it's like, you know, in Facebook and in Instagram, we do know whenever we post something there, it will be seen by everybody, you know. Like nobody should be fooled that he makes here a private photo album for himself, you know. And I think if we understand, you know, if we translate well enough the mechanics of how these systems work, people will inherently understand of what they want to put where. And obviously, ideally, we have many, right? For some, you know, a gamer identity doesn't need to be the same like the crypto trader, like the whatever, maybe like, you know, the blue, like pet lover, I don't know.
Yeah.
He's also on top of that, you know. But I think we have to like we have to give these tools where it's not only coming out of one. And absolutely right, it should be decentralized. It should be 100% owned by yourself. And you're also right. I mean, there's this Black Mirror episode, right, where everybody ranks each other through this ranking system. And
not even just Black Mirror. I mean, in China, ranking system.
But on the end, I think what it has to be is, these are all tools. It's like blockchain. I mean, blockchain can be used for all kinds of things, positive and negative. And it's about how we create the incentives in such a way that positive outcome is more possible and more enforced than the negative outcome. That there will be always, a tool that can be used for good and bad. You will never be just creating one that's only good or only bad. It will be always a little bit of both, and there will be people like diverge it but it's definitely also a very philosophical question when we talk about these rating and reputation systems, and that's definitely something that we have to think about.
Great that it came up here. So I think we are running now late with time. Let me just quickly check. Do we have more time for one question? Okay, so we have one community question coming in. Okay, so here it goes. So data is the new oil. How do we devise a unit to measure the value, price of personal data we get no control over or freely give away, to let tech companies for them to monetize or profit from it? We don't have data or value data the same way we value time and money. Shall I repeat the question?
It's like a statement or question. I'm not sure.
I'm also not so sure. Sorry. How do we devise? So it's basically, so if data is the new oil, what is the unit of measure for knowing how much a data point is valued? Or is it a data set? Or is it the attestation of your name or your place of birth? So what is the unit of measure? What do you think it could be?
Well, it's an interesting question for sure. I think we will have three different answers here. So from my point of view, I think as kind of like also one part of the question was about the price, and I think the price will determine in markets, and I think that will happen, and we will see the infrastructure for that. And when it comes to the kind of like what it's all about, so is it the name or is it something different? So I would really love to see much more use cases, also like what I think also Bruce is thinking about, like with Ocean, so that I can also monetize like anonymous data. So for example, my age and my blood type, and I don't know if I have some disease or not, and kind of this information can be used for scientific purposes, but without exposing my identity, and I can get like a tiny payment for that. I think so kind of having the data and to know that there's like a real identity behind it and that it's not fake is incredibly valuable. So I think there's like very difficult to put a low price tag on that.
I mean, I would actually say absolutely agree with you. It's on the end the markets that have to determine that. I mean, there's no institution that can say, your name is worth X. It's what people want to pay for it. And I guess the moment this data is available, and the moment startups start to build things that will use this data, companies and whatever, that's when they gain value or not, right?
I mean, the only thing I can add is different data obviously has different values. So for instance, a tweet from Elon Musk can move billions of dollars in value, good or bad. So that knowing that tweet is coming confers a unique advantage if you get access to it. And so different people and different kind of means of assessing that are going to emerge based on the tools that get provided. I'm struggling with this answer because it's everybody's data is valuable for themselves. And one of the things as Peter and Fabian were talking, I was thinking was, what happens if you assembled all your data in a data vault, your DNA information, your health history, allergies, your geolocation, your social graph, even your financial data. What happens if somebody was to do the experiment and just push that out into the world, maybe on ocean market, and then see what type of people come to that data and provide you with insights, or share it with the world actually, because it's obviously going to be out there. I was doing that thought experiment and wondering, is that valuable? How valuable would it be? And how much of a risk do you pose to yourself by doing something so stupid? And I'm not sure what the answer is, but I don't know, maybe there's somebody out there who's willing to give it a shot.
I think we can put that to the producers of Black Mirror for sure, and you'll get an answer. But for now, thank you so much for participating. This was really insightful.